Chapter 8 of The Beloved Vagabond by William John Locke. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Simon Evers. Chapter 8. When Funiculi Funicular was over, he sat on the wooden chair provided for him and wiped his face. His hands shook. He beckoned me to come nearer. "Do I look too grotesque a mountebank, Tom Fool?" he asked in English. He was wearing the pearl-buttoned velveteen suit, whose magnificence he had enhanced by newly purchased steel-buckle shoes and black stockings, and to a less bigoted worshipper than me, I suppose he must have looked a mountebank tomfool, but I only gaped at his question. "Do I?" he repeated almost fiercely. "You look beautiful, master," said I. He passed his lean fingers wearily over his eyes. "Pardon, my little Estico. There are things in heaven and earth, etc. Myriads of mysteries. As many in the heart of man as in your wonder-houses yonder. Get me some brandy. 3 petits verres poured into a tumbler." I went off to the restaurant and obtained the drink. When I returned, they were playing the mocking chorus that runs through Orphée aux Enfers. The number over, Paragot drained the glass at one gulp. The company broke into unusual applause. Someone shouted, "Bis!" "Get me some more," said he. "Do you know why I chose that tune?" "No, master." "Because 20 devils entered into me and played leapfrog over one another." "I am very fond of that little tune, it is so gay," said Blanquette, as if she were introducing a fresh topic of conversation. "I detest it," said my master. The maître d'hôtel came up and asked that the chorus should be played again as an encore. I fetched Paragot's drink, and having set it down beside him on the platform, went round with my tambourine. When I reached the table at which the 4 newcomers were seated, I found that they spoke English. They were a young man in a straw hat, a young girl, a forbidding-looking man of 40 with a beaky nose, and the loveliest lady I have ever seen in my life. She had the complexion of a sea-shell. Her eyes were the blue of glaciers, and they shone cold and steadfast. But her lips were kind. Her black hair under the large white tulle hat had the rare bluish tinge, looking as if cigarette smoke had been blown through it. Small and exquisitely made, she sat the princess of my boyish dreams. "I call it a ripping tune," cried the young girl. "I hate it more than any other tune in the world," said the lovely lady with a shiver. Her voice was like a peal of bells, or running water, or whatever silvery-sounding things you will. "It is very absurd to have such prejudices," said the beaky-nosed man of 40. He spoke like a Frenchman, and like a very disagreeable Frenchman. How dared he address my princess in that tone? I extended my tambourine. "Qu'est-ce que vous désirez?" asked the straw-hatted young man, in an accent as Britannic as the main deck of the Bellerophon. "Anything that the ladies will kindly give me, sir," I replied in our native tongue. "Hello, English! What are you knocking about France for?" I glanced at the lovely lady. She was crumbling bread and not taking the least notice of me. I was piqued. "My master thinks it the best way to teach me philosophy, sir," said I politely. If I had not learned much philosophy from him, I had at least learned politeness. The lady looked up with a smile. The young girl exclaimed that either my remark, or myself, I forget which, was ripping. I paid little heed to her. I have always disregarded the people of one adjective. They seem poverty-stricken to one who has sunned himself in the wealth of Paragot's epithets. "Your master is the gentleman in the pearl buttons?" inquired the young man. "Yes, sir." "What's his name?" "Berzelius Nibidad Paragot, sir," said I, so proudly that the lovely princess laughed. "I must look at him," she said, turning round in her chair. I, too, glanced at the familiar group on the platform. Larripé with his back to us, working his arms and shoulders at the piano, Blanquette seated on the other side, thrumming away at the zither on her lap, Narcisse lolling his tongue in that cynical grin of his, and Paragot fiddling in front, like a fiddler possessed, his clear eyes fixed on the lady in a most uncanny stare. When she turned again, she shivered once more. She did not look up, but went on crumbling bread. It shocked me to notice that the pink of her sea-shell face had gone, and that her fingers trembled. Then a wild conjecture danced through my brain, and I forgot my tambourine. "You still here?" laughed the young man. "What are you waiting for?" I started. "I beg your pardon, sir," said I, moving away. He laughed and called me back. "Here are 2 francs to buy a philosophy book." "And here are 5 sous not to come and worry us again," said the older man, in French. While I was wondering why they tolerated such a disagreeable man in the party, my beautiful lady's fingers flew to the gilt chain purse by her side. "And here are 5 francs because you are English," she exclaimed, and as she held me for a second with her eyes, I saw in them infinite depths of sadness and longing. When I returned to the platform, the piece had just been brought to an end. Parago poured his second brandy down his throat, and sat with his head in his hands. I shed, as usual, my takings into Blanquette's lap. Seeing the 5-franc piece, her eyes equalled it in size. "Tiens, 100 sous! Who gave it you?" I explained. "The most beautiful lady in the world." Parago raised his head and looked at me haggardly. "Why did she give you 5 francs?" "Because I was English," she said. "Did she talk to you?" "Yes, master, and I have never heard anyone speak so beautifully." Parago made no answer, but began to tune his violin. During the next interval my quartet left the restaurant. I ran to the gate and bowed as they passed by. The young fellow gave me a friendly nod, but the lovely ladies swept out cold-eyed, looking neither to right nor left. A large 2-horsed cab with a gay awning awaited them on the quay. As my lady entered, her skirt uplifted ever so little, and disclosed the most delicately shaped tiny foot that has ever been attached to woman. And then I felt sure. Those little feet so adored! A haunting phrase leaped to my brain, and I stood staring at the departing carriage, athrill with excitement. It was Joanna! Lovelier than I had pictured her in my Lotus Club dreams, more gracious than Ingonde or Clodeswinde, or any of the belles dames du temps jadis, whose ballades by Maître François Villon my master had but lately made me learn by heart, and whose names were so many sweet symphonies. It was Joanna, pure and ravishing as an April dawn. Joanna, beloved of Parago in those elusive days when I could not picture him, before he smashed his furniture with a crusader's mace and started on his wanderings under the guidance of Henri IV. It was Joanna whom he had an agonized desire to see in Madrid, and whose silvery English voice he had longed to hear. I, Astico, had seen her and had heard her silvery voice. Among boys, assuredly I was the most blessed. But Parago seemed that day of all men the most miserable, and I, more dog-like than Narcisse in my sympathy with his moods, almost lifted up my nose and whined for woe. All my thrill died away. I felt guilty, oddly ashamed of myself. I took a pessimistic view of life. What, thought I, are Joannas sent into the world for, save to play havoc with men's happiness? Maître François Villon was quite right. Samson, Sardanapalus, David, Maître François himself, all came to grief over Joannas. Bien heureux qui rien n'y a. Happy is he who has nothing to do with them. As soon as we were free, Parago left us and went off by himself. Whereupon I, mimetic as an ape, rejected the humble Blanquette's invitation to take a walk with her, and strolled moodily into the town with Narcisse at my heels. A dog-fight or two and a Byronic talk with a little tow-headed flower-seller who gave me a dusty bunch of cyclamen, as a porte-bonheur, she said prettily, whiled away the time until the people began to drift out of the wonder-houses to dress for dinner. I lingered at the gates, going from one to the other, in the unavowed hope, little idiot that I was, of seeing Joanna. At last, at the main entrance to the Villa des Fleurs, I caught sight of Parago. He had changed from the velveteens into his vagabond clothes, and was evidently on the same errand as myself. I did not venture near, respecting his desire for solitude, but lounged at the corner of the main street and the road leading down to the villa, playing with Narcisse and longing for something to happen. You see, it is not given every day to an impressionable youngster, his brain stuffed with poetry, pictures, and such like delusive visionary things, to tumble head first into the romance of the actual world. For the moment, the romance was at a standstill. I longed for a further chapter. It was a pity, I reflected, that we did not live in Merovingian times. Then Parago and I could have lain in wait with our horses. Everyone had horses in knightly days. And when Joanna came near, we should have killed the beaky-nosed man, and Parago would have swung her on his saddle-bow, and we would have galloped away to his castle in the next kingdom, where Parago and Joanna and I, with Blanquette to be tire-woman to our princess, would have lived happy ever after. What I expected to get for myself, heaven knows. It did not strike me that perennial contemplation of another's bliss might wear out the stoutest altruism. Then, suddenly, out of the door of the villa came two ladies, one of whom I recognized as Joanna, and the other as the young girl of the luncheon party. The facade of the villa stretches across the road, and is about 100 yards from the corner. I saw Parago stand rigid, and make no sign of recognition as she passed him by, with her head up like a proud queen. I felt an odd pain at my heart. Why was she so cruel? Her eyes were of the blue of glaciers, but all the rest of her face had seemed tender and kind. I was aware, in a general way, that radiantly attired ladies do not shake hands with ragamuffins in public places, but you must please to remember that I no more considered Parago a ragamuffin than I thought Blanquette the equal of Joanna. Parago, to me, was the peer of kings. I turned away sorrowing, and sauntered up the little street that leads to the Établissement des Bains. I was disappointed in Joanna, and did not want to see her again. She should be punished for her cruelty. I sat down on one of the benches on the Place, and, looking at the mairie clock, stolidly thought of supper. They made famous onion soup at the little auberge where we lodged, and Parago, himself a connoisseur, had pronounced their tripe à la mode de Caen superior to anything that Mrs. Housekeeper had executed for the Lotus Club. Besides, I was getting hungry. With youth, a full heart rarely compensates an empty stomach, and now even my heart was growing empty. Presently, who should emerge into the place but the two ladies? I sat on my bench and watched them cross. They were evidently going up the hill to one of the hotels behind the établissement. In her white dress and white tulle hat, coloured by 3 great roses, with her beautiful hair and seashell face and swaying supple figure, she looked the incarnation of all that was worshipful in women. I could have knelt and prayed to her. Why was she so cruel to my master? I regarded her with mingled reproach and adoration. But the mixed feeling gave place to one of amazement when I saw her separate from her companion, who continued her way up the hill, strike straight across the Place in my direction. She was coming to me. I rose, took off my ragged hat, and twirled it in my fingers, which was the way that Parago had taught me to be polite in France. "I want to speak to you," she said quickly. "You are the boy with the tambourine, aren't you?" "Yes, mademoiselle." Parago threatened to shoot me if I called any young lady miss. "What is the name of the gentleman who played the violin?" "Basilius Nibidad Parago." "That is not his real name?" "No, mademoiselle," said I. "What is it?" "I don't know," said I.
"This is a new name. He has only had it a week." "How long have you known him?" "A long, long time, mademoiselle. He adopted me when I was quite small." "You're not very big now," she said with a smile. "I'm nearly 16," said I proudly. To herself she murmured, "I don't think I can be mistaken." In a very different tone she continued, "You spoke some nonsense about his being your master and teaching you philosophy." "It wasn't nonsense," I replied stoutly. "He teaches me everything. He teaches me history and Shakespeare and François Villon and painting and Schopenhauer and the tambourine." Her pretty lips pouted in a little gasp of astonishment as she leaned on her long parasol and looked at me. "You are the oddest little freak I have come across for a long time." I smiled happily. She could have called me anything opprobrious in that silvery voice of hers, and I should have smiled. Now I come to think of it, smile is the wrong word. The man smiles, the boy grins. I grinned happily. "Has your master always played the violin in orchestras like this?" "Oh, no, mademoiselle," said I. "Of course not. He only began 4 days ago." "What was his employment till then?" "Why, none," said I. It seemed absurd for Paragot to have employment like a man behind a shop counter. I remembered acquaintances of my mother's who were out of employment, and their unspeakable vileness. Then, echo of Paragot, for what else could I be, I added, "We just walk about Europe for the sake of my education. My master said I was to learn life from the book of the universe." The lovely lady sat down. "I believe you are nothing more nor less than an amazing little parrot. I am sure you speak exactly like your master." "Oh, no, mademoiselle," said I modestly. "I wish I could. There's no one who can talk like him in all the world." She gave me a long, steady, half-frightened look out of her blue eyes. I know now that I had struck a chord of memory, that I had established beyond question in her mind Paragot's identity with the man who had loved her in days past. That old things, sweet and terrifying, surged within her heart. Even then, holding their secret, I saw that she had recognized Paragot. "You must think me a very inquisitive lady," she said with a forced smile, "but you must forgive me. What you said this morning about your master teaching you philosophy interested me greatly. One thing I should like to know," and she dug at the gravel with the point of her parasol, "and that I hardly like to ask. Are you very poor?" "Poor?" was a totally new idea. "Why, no, mademoiselle. He has a great bank in London which sends him banknotes whenever he wants them. I once went with him. He has heaps of money." The lady rose. "So this going about as a mountebank is only a masquerade," she said with a touch of scorn. "He did it to help Blanquette," said I. "Blanquette?" "The girl who plays the zither. My master has adopted her too." "Oh, has he?" said the lady, the blue of her eyes becoming frosty again. I dimly perceived that in mentioning Blanquette I had been indiscreet. In what respect I knew not. I had intended my remark to be a tribute to Paragot's wide-heartedness. She took it as if I had told her of a crime. Women, even the loveliest of dream Joannas, are a mystifying race. Bienheureux qui rien n'y a. "Good-bye," she said. "Good-bye, mademoiselle." She must have read mortification in my face, for she turned after a step or two, and said more kindly, "You're not responsible anyway." Then she paused, as if hesitating, while I stood, hat in hand, as I had done during our conversation. "I wonder if I can trust you." She took her purse from the bag hanging at her waist, and drew out a gold piece. "I will give you this if you promise not to tell your master that you have spoken to me this afternoon." I shrank back. Remember, I had been for 3 years in the hourly companionship of a man of lofty soul, for all his waywardness, and he had modelled me like wax to his liking. The gold piece was tempting. I had never owned a gold piece in my life, and all the frost had melted from Joanna's eyes. But I felt I should be dishonoured in taking money. "I promise without that," I said. She put the coin back in her purse, and held out her delicately gloved hand. "Promise with this, then," she said. And then I knew for the first time what an exquisite sensitive thing is a sweet, high-bred lady. Only such a one could have performed that act of grace. She converted me into a besotted little imbecile weltering in bliss. I would have pledged my soul's welfare to execute any phantasmagoric behest she had chosen to ordain. "I am leaving Aix tomorrow morning, but if you are ever in any trouble... By the way, what is your name?" "Asticot Pradle," said I, reflecting for the first time that though Polydore Pradle had perished and Basilius Nibidard Paragot reigned in his stead, my own borrowed or invented name remained unaltered. Augustus Smith lingered in my memory as a vague, mythical creature of no account. Joanna smiled. "You are a little masquerader too. Well, if you are ever in any trouble and I can help you, remember the Comtesse de Verneuil, 7 Avenue de Messine, Paris." This offer of friendship took my breath away. I grinned stupidly at her. I was also puzzled. "What is the matter?" she laughed. "The Comtesse de Verny, but you are English," I stammered. "Yes, but my husband is French. He is the Comte de Verny. Remember, 7 Avenue de Messine." She nodded graciously and turned away, leaving a stupefied Asticot twirling his hat. Her husband? And I had been calling her Mademoiselle all the time. And I had been waving fairy tales of our riding off with her to Patago's castle. She was married. Her husband was the Comte de Verny. Worse than that, her husband was the disagreeable, beaky-nosed man who gave me 5 sous to go away. A sense of desolation, disaster, disillusionment overwhelmed me. I sat on the bench and burst out crying, and Narcisse jumped up and licked my face. End of chapter 8.